Yep, it's the start of a new week. TGIM. Of course, it's also the start of the last week of October. And it is certainly starting to feel like late October. I just haven't seen near as many leaves turning yet as I would have expected. You know, one of the things that I really like here about the Chattanooga area was the riverfront area. Remember back when we used to have a riverboat? It was called the Delta Queen. Well, over in Memphis, they have the American Queen riverboat. And they said it's going to spend even more time in Memphis in 2016 as demand rises for overnight cruises on the lower Mississippi River. In fact, sales of next year's cruises are up 200% over this time last year. Well, the company is based in Memphis because city government helped finance the 436 passenger paddle wheelers purchase and return to service in 2012. The company employs about 225 people, including about 50 in the head office. The Riverfront Development Corporation is seeing more interest in Memphis from other operators as well. So more boats, more boats, more jobs, more money, more tax revenues. Well, one of the people down there said that everybody believes there's this bottomless pit of people who will take that cruise. Tourist destination, in other words. Well, they've got this organization down there called Beale Street Landing. That's a major contributor to downtown hotel bookings, generating about 12,000 room nights this year alone. And they expect even more next year. Well, of course, they've invested $43 million in the landing area over there, which includes a restaurant and more docking and whatnot, just revitalizing the whole area. Now, see, this is what happens when you have people that actually have a vision and are willing to help other people out to do that vision. Now, here in Chattanooga, we had a riverboat that people in another area who were jealous of the riverboat were putting up roadblocks. Well, instead of trying to get our local politicians and our state and federal politicians to work together to make the Delta Queen our pride and joy, just like the American Queen is Memphis's pride and joy, we had a short-sighted city government that at every single turn did everything they could to run the Delta Queen out of town. First, they made them park on the other side of the river. Then they were complaining that, well, this river paddle boat made the river look bad. Well, first off, the paddle boat did not look bad. And second off, where else would you expect to see a river boat but on the river? Did they expect to see it down at Hamilton Place Mall? I don't think so. But every time they could have gone one way and helped it out, even if just morally helped it out. Andy Burke and the city government did everything they could to run it out of town till they finally succeeded in running it out of town to a town that will actually appreciate it. I never could quite figure out what Andy Burke had against the riverboat. I assume he knows how to swim. I assume he likes the water. But, he could throw money at all these different developments and everything. He could invest, thousands and thousands of dollars on a new city center down over off of 12th Street, which hasn't really panned out too much. He could have put a little bit of effort, not even his own money. He could have just, given them moral help and said, we would really love to see something come of that. I never once heard Andy Burke say anything good about the riverboat. Bitch, carp. That's all he ever did till he got his way and ran it out of town. And we still don't know what he had against it. Oh, well. An opportunity lost forever for Chattanooga. We've got so many tourists coming into this town. We just had all these big boat races here on the Tennessee River, kayak races and whatnot. And they're fixing to be having some more in November. It would have been so nice to have these little boats, Big Brother, right there. Not to mention the fact that just like in Memphis, if you get one and it does well, it attracts more. Next thing you know, you're a destination. You know, kind of like we've got trains here in town. First you had one, then they built the museum, then the Tennessee Valley Museum, then they started, getting the choo-choo. Now you've got this place is a destination for people that like trains. I'm glad we had all of that in place before Andy became mayor. Otherwise, we might not have any trains. Well, anyway, whatever. Liberals just, I just cannot quite understand their thinking sometimes. I mean, if you have an evil person and he knows that he can get away with hurting somebody else and it gives him pleasure to do that, he's going to do it. If you have like a young punk that thinks he can knock out an innocent person and never suffer any physical pain or get into trouble for it, such as maybe being knocked out himself, what happens to his willingness to play the knockout game? If we guarantee students in school that they can assault a teacher and not get into trouble, what do you think is going to happen to assaults on teachers? Pretty soon you're going to start losing teachers left and right because they ain't going to put up with it. They'll just quit. And after every tragic shooting, liberals and progressives call for more gun laws. They exploit American ignorance as to why the framers gave us the Second Amendment protections in the first place. And the liberals don't care. They totally ignore why we have the Second Amendment. James Madison, he's the father of our Constitution. He said the advantage of being armed, which the Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation, where the governments are afraid to trust the people with arms. Alexander Hamilton said, the best we can hope for concerning the people at large is that they be properly armed. As the representatives of the people betray their constituents, then there is no recourse left but to, in the exertion of that original right of self-defense, which is paramount to all positive forms of government. I'd say right now we've got a negative form of government, because right now our government is telling us what we can't do. Can't do this, can't do that. The Constitution tells the federal government what it can't do. That seems to have gotten lost in the translation somewhere. Thomas Jefferson. What country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. Richard Henry Lee said, to preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them. Our founding fathers had a deep distrust and suspicion of government in general and of Congress in particular. Before we even had the United States government, we had the Continental Congress. So they had a vague idea of what could happen if you didn't pay attention. They knew from the English government what would happen if you let them get away with it. If the founders did not believe that Congress would abuse our liberties, they would not have provided the protections of the Bill of Rights. Oh, man. Liberals and progressives express alarm that there are an estimated 300 million plus privately held firearms in our country. Some have called for a national arms registry to be created to keep track of gun ownership. Well, needless to say, that's pretty dangerous. Suppose there comes a time when a dictator takes over or a leader surrenders our nation. Well, I can see this. Well, we've almost got a dictator now. At the same time, we've also got a leader who could very easily surrender our nation. You know, he's one of those, if I can't have it, you can't have it either types. But either way, a dictator or a foreign conqueror would love to have information on gun ownership, especially when you look at the history of gun ownership and people trying to take it away from people. Well, right here in America, that's right, right here in America, last Monday, a week ago, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision on the New York SAFE Act. According to the court, virtually all of the law, which clearly infringes on the rights of the people to keep and bear arms, does not violate the Second Amendment, when it clearly does. The Times-Union, a paper, writes, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has upheld the constitutionality of the SAFE Act gun control law in a decision that came to the same conclusion about a Connecticut law that, like New York State's measure, was passed in response to the December 2012 killings in Newtown, Connecticut. In a decision issued Monday, a three-judge panel concluded that the core provisions of the expanded ban on assault weapons in both states does not violate the Second Amendment because they are substantially related to the achievement of an important governmental interest. In this case, public safety and crime reduction, and are therefore subject to intermediate and not strict court scrutiny. So I guess they think that if they take guns away from people, it's going to increase safety. Like there was guns in the gun-safe zones where these killings took place. They already had no guns, and they want to make sure there's even more no guns. What might have helped save some of those people and some of those kids was if somebody in there had had a gun. Need we say the response to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun? How many times can you say that before they finally hear it? Well, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals decision released Monday on the New York Unsafe Act is both disappointing and expected given the politicized nature of the issue. Just as no American citizens should face felony prosecution in one state for what is seen as free speech in another state, no American citizens should be denied their Second Amendment rights just because they live in New York or Connecticut. The SAFE Act is an assault on the civil rights of all Americans, and the fight against it will be continued with renewed vigor. We are hopeful that the Supreme Court will soon put this issue to bed in favor of equal rights for all Americans. Well, I heard somebody say the other day that we're one liberal Supreme Court justice away from having no rights at all. Everything right now is being decided 5-4, 5-4, 5-4. If you change one of those to a liberal, you're going to have 4-5. And then where are we going to live? Meanwhile, Governor Andrew Cuomo admonished the rest of the states to follow New York's leads. The core provisions of the New York SAFE Act do not violate the Second Amendment, he wrote in a statement. Today, common sense prevailed. Well, sorry, Governor Cuomo, but far from common sense, the plain reading of the Second Amendment emphatically states the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed except. But that's what we've got today. And the exceptions are piling up. By making laws that restrict the amount of bullets one can have in a gun, that infringes on those citizens' rights to carry the guns they already own. Because according to this, if you're only allowed to have 7 bullets in your gun, and you have a gun with a 10-round clip, even if you only put 7 bullets in it, you're breaking the law because the gun could carry more. You're guilty before you've even done it. And don't think that's part of their plan. The court is in violation of law just as much as the New York governor, legislature, and any police officer that enforces such tyrannical laws. They, at that point, would be the criminals. And the thing is that not one of the New York Safe Act provisions, not a one, would have stopped those tragedies. And they are clear violations of the Second Amendment. Yeah, New York set an example, all right. It's an un-American communist example, but they have set up an example of lawlessness and tyranny against their own citizens. But hey, that's what the people voted in. If the SAFE Act is upheld by the Supreme Court, nothing prevents Congress from summarily outlawing tens of millions of firearms overnight. Once those firearms become contraband, the governor may confiscate and destroy them without compensating the owner. After all, they confiscate and destroy illegal drugs. Why wouldn't they confiscate and destroy illegal guns, even if the gun was legal yesterday? Well, this should terrify conservatives and Second Amendment supporters. Well, I don't know about that. To me, I think it should terrify those pushing these unconstitutional measures, because enough of us know exactly what comes following gun bans and confiscation. Look what happened to the Jews after they took all the guns from the Jews. Look what happened in Russia when they took all the guns away from the non-communists. Look what happened when they took all the guns away from all of the non-communists in China. They were the first ones killed. And I think there's a few American patriots out there that are not going to let that happen here. They're not going to go down without a fight. In fact, it's those that attempt to be the pawns of gun-grabbing politicians are going to be the ones that get snuffed out first by American patriots, and then the politicians who supported such measures would be called upon to enforce their lawless measures or worse. If you don't think that can't happen here, you're wrong. It's already happening here. Not just with the New York SAFE Act, but every day reveals new abuses of executive power by President Barack Hussein Obama. Maybe you should say insane Obama. And, of course, of lawless actions by a rogue administration that is systematically infected with a disdain for the rule of law. Georgetown University law professor Jonathan Turley said the problem with what the president is doing is that he's not simply posing a danger to the constitutional system. He's becoming the very danger the Constitution was designed to avoid. He said that they're creating a new system. Within that system, we have the rise of an uber presidency. There could be no greater damage for individual liberty than that, and I think the framers would be horrified by this shift. I mean, just look at two examples of this seismic shift. Diametrically opposed notions, both involving criminals, neither one of which has any basis in law or authority. One releases violent criminals into our midst, while the other makes new criminals from ordinary law-abiding Americans. The first is endemic to immigration policies under which U.S. border security simply no longer exists. It represents Obama's refusal to fulfill his duty, his constitutional duty, to take care that the law be faithfully executed. He decides which laws he's going to execute and which laws he's going to not execute. That's not a president's job. Under such policies, our country has been endangered by an influx of very violent criminals, including members of gangs like MS-13. They say that there's the possibility that hundreds of thousands of their members have been coming into America. The result has been an unprecedented increase in violent crime in urban areas. In addition, there's an ongoing effort by the Department of Homeland Security, misnomer if I ever heard one, to release into the general population criminal aliens awaiting deportation or prosecution. Just, Oh, we'll trust them to come back to court. We'll trust them. Yeah, right. In the last fiscal year, DHS cut loose 166,000 alien criminals who had racked up over 88,000 criminal convictions in American courts for crimes from murder and rape and assault down to kidnapping. The insanity is just half the story. The other half is worse. Meanwhile, Obama's anti-Second Amendment bureaucrats are spreading their influence into agencies throughout the government. They're expanding the definition of prohibited persons under the Gun Control Act. Federal law lists classes of people for whom possession or acquisition of firearms is a felony, punishable by 5 years in prison. You know, like convicted felons, fugitives from justice, individuals in the drug trade are among those people. However, they've added the category adjudicated as a mental defective. Now, you would say, well, of course, I understand not giving a crazy person a gun. The problem is, who makes that determination? Because the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has reinvented the statute, expanding mental defective to include law-abiding men and women who maybe just require assistance in their business affairs. Those that maybe have somebody assigned to their accounts as a representative payee, someone who empowers others to cash their government checks, Social Security payments, or veterans benefits. They say, well, if you need help doing that, you're mentally defective. You don't need a gun. You can't have a gun. And they have been grabbing their weapons left and right, including a substantial number of veterans. Over 177 veterans are on that list. Real criminals versus manufactured criminals. That's the essence of the international chaos of Obama's Uber presidency intended to destroy our liberty. We must assure in 2016 that the next president is committed to restoring our heritage of freedom and undoing the destruction wrought by Obama's fundamental transformation of America as we know it. He knows what he's doing. He is transforming America into something that is very un-American. That's why they're so anti-Constitution. They don't want a Constitution. It slows them down too much from taking power, from putting us in chains. And before they can put us in chains, they know that they have to take our guns because that's the way it has always been. We have to decide, are we ready to live with chains, or are we going to defend our liberty? Are we going to defend our Constitution? Because, folks, the politicians ain't going to do it. The question is, how's our military? How's our police forces? Are they going to stand up for the Constitution? Or are they going to bow to the dictates of an unlawful party? Time for them to cowboy up. We'll be back with more after these commercial words.
Give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Expect lots of clouds and fog out there through the nighttime. Cooler lows into the mid-50s with a few lingering showers. Now for Tuesday, still unsettled, lots of clouds with a few scattered showers, highs upper 60s. A lingering shower possible Wednesday, dry for Thursday and Friday. Join us at Abba's House this Wednesday from 6 to 8:30 p.m. for our annual Trunk or Treat. There'll be inflatables, live entertainment, and, of course, tons of candy. It's a free gift to our community from Abba's House. And I'm WDEF News 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Orr.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report, every Sunday at 9 a.m. This week, we take a step back from politics, business, and global events to speak with well-being expert Deepak Chopra. We've all had the experience of feeling invisible at a party, at work, or at home. Join us as we discover what to do when we feel invisible this Sunday at 9 a.m. on the Costa Report, right here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
Tired of insurance companies? Tired of doctors that won't spend time with you? Do something different. Leave the sick care model of medicine and come to Dr. Danielle Mitchell, the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health, where we're interested in long-term health solutions, not the quick fixes. Come see me, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, at the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health. I'm all about the long-term healthcare solutions and doing what's best. On the web, you can find me at ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. That's ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Or call us at 875-1005, 875-1005, or find us on social media, Facebook, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, or the ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Let's go, ya!
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
News Talk Radio, 1240 AM. You can also get us at hotnewstalkradio.com and even on YouTube at Hot News Talk Radio. We've also got a Twitter station. Guess where? Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. That's right. You can get the latest news and weather and things of that nature on Twitter at Hot News Talk Radio. So, and of course, if you watch us on YouTube or on our YouTube button on hotnewstalkradio.com, you can always watch us doing our shows live on our Hot News Cam, only on Hot News Talk Radio. But, you know, it's just not our government that's trying to impact our lives. The vast majority of people that are in Washington, D.C. right now are very much one-worlders. Everybody's all about the United Nations. Of course, my question is always, name one thing that the UN has done for us. The UN has done a number of things to us, but what has the United Nations ever done for the United States of America? They take our money. They treat us badly when they come into our country. Look at all the trouble they caused New York City, where the UN capital is. Well, now they finally went too far. The United Nations, through the World Health Organization, wants to take our bacon. I find this just so funny because, you know, it was just last week that the federal government was trying to take bacon out of the prisons. Senator Grassley jumped up and wanted to see all the reports and figures that they claimed they had, and without showing him any of them, they backed right down. Well, maybe somebody needs to go to WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer, because the World Health Organization has targeted processed meats such as bacon, ham, sausage, and even red meat as hazardous to our health. Have they looked at people's teeth? Do they not realize people are carnivores? We eat meat. That's what we do. Well, WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer put burgers and bacon right alongside asbestos, arsenic, cigarettes, and alcohol as a health threat. Well, needless to say, it's already drawing fire from real scientists and meat experts, such as those with the North American Meat Institute. claiming that the report went against both common sense and dozens of studies showing no correlation between meat and cancer. Yeah, this agency that did this, had representatives from 10 different countries that made up this group. Now, my first question would be, which 10 countries made up this group saying that bacon, ham, and sausage are causes of cancer? You think maybe one or two, maybe all 10 are Islamic? I mean, you realize that if the Islamics do ever succeed in taking over the whole planet the way that they want to, I don't know which they'd be in a bigger rush to do, to kill all the Christians or to kill all the pigs. Well, I just cannot believe that they're trying to say that bacon has the same risk to our health as lung cancer and cigarette smokers. That's just, that's what happens when you give people too much power. They have to make up stuff to keep their power. Speaking of agencies trying to keep their power, government overreach, in other words, the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is the agency tasked with protecting wild horses and cattle in their grazing lands. Every once in a while you see these ads where they do a roundup and they catch some of these wild Mustangs, and they take them and they try to sell them to people that will give them good homes. And you can actually buy like a young colt that was born out in the American West, and you can raise them to be a saddle horse. And you can buy them halfway reasonable, but you have to meet a lot of conditions, and boy, they want those conditions met. You have to have the right sort of place to keep them. You got to have the right amount of food. You got to have you got all these hoops you're supposed to jump through to get one horse, maybe two. Well, between 2009 and 2012, a rancher named Tom Davis purchased 1,800 federally protected wild horses through the agency's Wild Horse and Burro program, and he sent them to a slaughterhouse down in Mexico, according to a report from the Interior Department's Office of Inspector General. Now, ironically funny is that Mr. Tom Davis also has connections with Obama's former Secretary of the Interior, Ken Salazar. Now, Ken Salazar got his job because he was appointed via Harry Reid, who, of course, is out of Nevada. Now, Ken Salazar has done a lot of back scratching with Harry Reid. Areas that were supposed to be off limits to any sort of industrialization was suddenly mysteriously taken off the rolls of protected lands and sold to the Chinese, of all people, by Harry Reid's son. And when everything started getting kind of dicey, Ken Salazar just quit. But in the meanwhile, of course, here's another friend of his he's doing these little deals with. And they said that it was determined that BLM did not follow current law while managing the Wild Horse and Burro program. It also failed to follow its own policy of limiting horse sales and ensuring that the horses sold went to good homes and were not slaughtered. So, in other words, the BLM was doing the exact opposite of what they were required to do by law. Yeah, even Mr. Davis admitted that most of the horses he purchased went to slaughter. He said, well, he tried to defend himself and saying, well, in selling so many loads of horses, the BLM had to know that the horses would end up at the slaughterhouse. And here's the ultimate thing. He was paying less than the average people would pay for the horses. He was paying as little as $10 a piece for each horse. He spent less than $18,000 in total for the almost 1,800 horses. Meanwhile, it cost the Bureau of Land Management $140,000 to deliver the horses to Mr. Davis. That's pretty good when you can spend $18,000 and have the government spend $140,000 delivering them to you. And then he turned around and sold them for $154,000 in profit by selling them for slaughter. Oh. In fact, the agency did not stop selling horses to Mr. Davis even after receiving reports that he was sending horses to slaughter. The investigation was referred to the U.S. Attorney General's Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado, which declined civil and criminal prosecution. It took more than 3 years for the Office of Inspector General to confirm what we've always known, that BLM sold these federally protected wild horses to a known kill buyer who sold them to slaughter, yet not one person at the BLM is being held accountable, and Tom Davis himself is not being prosecuted for violating his contractual obligation to not sell the horses. Of course, we know that if you're on the Obama side, it doesn't matter what you do. You could kill somebody on live TV and you wouldn't get in trouble. It's just disgusting. Meanwhile, another federal overreach. Accompanied by state and local police, undercover and camo-clad federal agents with the FBI and DEA, that right there is your first sign, the DEA, descended upon tribal lands of the Menominee Nation in Wisconsin on last Friday to destroy and confiscate what tribal officials are calling legal industrial hemp crops. Not marijuana, hemp. Adorned in tactical gear and armed with AR-15s, the drug warriors focused their efforts along County Road M west of Suring in Menominee County and utilized front-end loaders and dump trucks to seize over 30,000 plants. It was serving a search warrant granted by a federal judge in Green Bay to raid a home outbuilding in about 20 acres of tribal land in the county. Now, in tribal lands, there's a whole different series of laws that pertain to tribal lands as opposed to federal lands. Tribal lands are almost a foreign nation, but that didn't stop the government from going in there. Of course, when it comes to the Indians, not much has ever stopped the federal government from doing whatever the crap they want with the Indians. No arrests were made. Isn't that always to do? Come in, completely tear up everything, do whatever they want, trample your rights in the ground, but no arrests were made. Well, if nothing was illegal, what were you doing there? If no laws were broken, what were you doing there? If a law was broken, why didn't you arrest somebody? The seizure flies in the face of a Department of Justice claim made last year that they would no longer go after American Indian tribes growing marijuana on sovereign lands. And even though the tribe approved measures to legalize marijuana for recreational and medicinal purposes in August, the operation confirms that federal drug warriors weren't going anywhere. In fact, tribal chairman Gary Besaw said the heavy-handed agents improperly and unnecessarily entered sovereign lands and destroyed their industrial hemp crop, despite the tribe legalizing the cultivation and study of low-THC, non-psychotropic industrial hemp under an agreement with a local college back in May. They were growing the crop to comply with Congress's actions in the 2014 Farm Bill, which recognized a distinction between marijuana and industrial hemp. It would allow for the growth, cultivation, and the study of industrial hemp in certain circumstances, and the tribe's production of hemp was in accordance with that bill. He said, "I am deeply disappointed that the Obama administration has made the decision to utilize the full force of the DEA to raid our tribe," Besaw said. "We were attempting to grow industrial hemp for research purposes in accordance with the federal Farm Bill. In fact, the tribe offered to take any differences in the interpretation of the Farm Bill to federal court. It even offered to destroy certain strains of the industrial hemp crop that the feds had identified as problematic. but the offers by the tribe were rejected in favor of the aggressive unilateral action. Indeed, the Obama administration sent agents to destroy our crops while simultaneously allowing recreational marijuana in Colorado. I just wish the president would explain to tribes why we can't grow industrial hemp like the states, and even more importantly, why we didn't deserve an opportunity to make our argument to a federal judge rather than having our community raided by the DEA. Well, that's because the DEA wanted to make an example out of you. It didn't matter if you were right or wrong. You have to submit to the federal government. That's what they want. They will make an example out of you so that maybe the next people don't have to, don't try to stand up for their rights. Trying to go to court while you're trying to stand up for your rights. We can't have that now, can we? Just like in Texas, they've been having a problem for several years with, again, the BLM trying to take property owned by Texas ranchers along the Red River for several years now. The BLM has several times tried to step in and confiscate land that has been owned by Texas ranchers for literally 150 years. What it is you've got land that goes up to the Red River, which is the border between the two states. Well, state laws state that the floodplain area could be considered public property, which the BLM or the state governments or whatever could get some sort of jurisdiction over. But the vast majority of that land, over 1,000 acres of the land, has nothing to do with that. Never has, never did. But the BLM is trying to take the land from the people with no compensation even. Well, when Greg Abbott was the Attorney General of Texas, he went up against the BLM back in 2014 and told them to get out of the state. And at that time, the BLM did back down. Well, now the BLM is back. Greg Abbott's the governor over there now, and he has told them, you try coming into this state, you're going to have more than you can shake a stick at in trouble, because he's going to get the Texas State Guard and the Texas Highway Patrol and whoever else he needs to kick the BLM out of Texas. We need that kind of gumption here in Tennessee, folks. It's like here in Tennessee, every time you turn around, our officials are backing down to this group or that group, primarily, like the Muslims. They need to get some gumption. Here's the thing you got to think about. Point to ponder, if you will. If you have to violate someone's rights to do your job, you are the criminal. And we need local law enforcement who are willing to stand up against illegal orders, willing to stand on their oath to uphold the law, and willing to call out the wicked action of others. If you see somebody breaking the law and you don't fulfill your oath to stop them or to report them, you're aiding and abetting, which means you are just as bad as they are. It grieves me greatly to see that so many naive and ignorant, that's the word, ignorant, local officials and officers supporting tyrannical acts because they are just following orders. And it bothers me to my soul that some brotherhood, some union would keep officers from calling out this wickedness amongst their own. We need officers who will finally realize that following orders did not work in Nuremberg and shouldn't be an excuse in America. This is supposed to be the land of the free, the land of liberty. It is just unfortunate that so many have had to suffer for so long. This isn't a Fourth Amendment right. This is an inherent right. This is not a limitation on the federal government. The federal government was already limited by the articles of the Constitution. This is a reminder to you, the people, to limit government and defend liberty when government escapes its limited and defined nature because they are inherent rights. It doesn't matter what government it may be, whether it's the U.S. government, whether it's the government of another country, it doesn't matter. These are inherent rights. We hold these truths to be self-evident. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. Yes, the state can be tyrannical. Even our county and our city can be tyrannical. Is tyranny ever okay? Even if it's not the feds, tyranny is tyranny. We need to all wake up and defend liberty and stop making excuses. The only thing I ask of our government is to obey the same laws you expect us to obey. I don't care if you're the president of the United States or the local dog catcher. You are subject to the same laws we are, period. That's been the major problem with the country, is Obama picks and chooses which laws that he and his cronies go for. It's even more maddening how the complicit liberal progressive media goes along. If just a third of the infractions and incidents of the Obama administration had been carried out by a Republican administration, you'd see blood streaming from the eyes, steam from their ears, and frothing at the mouth from the progressive socialist left. The Justice Department just announced Friday afternoon that it will not be bringing criminal charges against Lois Lerner or any other IRS official involved in the targeting of Tea Party groups. Whether you like the Tea Party or not, what they did was illegal. In a decision Republicans ripped as a free pass, the department said the investigation into the controversy will be closed. And while they found mismanagement, poor judgment, and institutional inertia, they found no evidence that would support a criminal prosecution. Assistant Attorney General Peter J. Kadzik wrote, "What occurred is disquieting and may necessitate corrective action." May necessitate corrective action? We didn't even get that. Do your job, Assistant Attorney General. He says it does not warrant criminal prosecution. What does it take then? Representative Darrell Issa said the move marks a low point of accountability for the Obama administration. Giving Lois Lerner a free pass only reinforces the idea that government officials are above the law and there's no consequence for wrongdoing. Can we say Hillary Clinton? Speaking of, I mean, it shows you how they feel when Barack Obama has made statements about punishing your enemies when talking to the Hispanics about the Republicans trying to enforce border immigration. And last week in the Democrat presidential debate, Hillary Clinton referred to Republicans as one of her biggest enemies. So why should Lois Lerner be criminally charged? She was doing exactly what the progressive liberal socialist left, who owned the Democratic Party, embraces. She was doing what they wanted her to do to the T. Incidentally, Lerner and the Irish did have what they did have no comparison to anything in the Bush administration. As a matter of fact, how can it be that Al Sharpton has not been investigated and targeted by the IRS? Well, that's not the way the game is played. He gets to visit Obama in the White House. She can use the might of the federal government against innocent people. If it were you or me and we owed the IRS millions in back taxes, do you think we'd be up shaking the hand of Obama? Look at Eric Holder, Operation Fast and Furious, that cost the life of a U.S. Border Patrol agent, not to mention others. What about Benghazi, where Obama and Clinton both lied to the American people? We watched the shameful display of the Democrats focused on one thing, to protect themselves. It's time for us to cowboy up and hold these people accountable and make them obey the same laws that we do. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with more Cowboy Up with Tex.